Dr. Mark Hyman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, your new book, Food Fix Uncensored, it will be out the day this episode is released, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I have one question I really wanted to ask. For someone who lives and breathes health, what is the hardest healthy practice you personally struggle to do regularly?
That's a great question, and the answer is pretty easy for me. I have a very great life, and I travel a lot, and I love it, and it makes having a regular sleep and wake schedule very difficult.
Sleep.
There's a great quote by E.B. White. It says, every morning I wake up determined to change the world and have a great time, and that makes planning the day very difficult.
It seems like you really do enjoy yourself, and I think that's amazing, because health is so much more than, of course, just diet and whatnot. So, okay, let's get into this new book. So, you published Food Fix 6 years ago, and I remember reading that book while I was working in DC. I was very inspired because it's like somebody, very influential is writing about food systems.
Yeah.
That was really cool for me. So I really want to know, over the last 6 years, what has changed? What has made you feel like you really need to take the gloves off here?
I mean, look, when I wrote that book, it was a fantasy. I literally wrote what I think was wrong with the American food system from the field to the fork. And I highlighted a lot of what I thought were intractable problems and what has been called the corporate capture of American politics and American food systems and health systems, and from everything from our agricultural policies to our FDA policies around food labeling, to the FCC policies around food marketing, to the ways in which research is done and funded, to ways in which the industry has co-opted professional groups like the American Medical Association, Heart Association. They get $192 million from industry, from the food industry and pharma industry. It's crazy. And they co-opt social groups like the NAACP. They co-opt and lead these front groups that create misinformation like the American Council on Science and Health. So I just never thought that things would change. And, like it or not, we have a president who's emboldened Bobby Kennedy to talk about chronic disease for the first time. I mean, I felt like for decades I was standing on a mountaintop screaming at the top of my lungs, hey, everybody, we have a chronic disease epidemic. It's crippling our country. It's causing so much loss of life and disability and the economic burden and the social burden, the environmental burden. I mean, I saw the whole thing. I see things like the way my brain works is I see things in systems and I know how everything's connected. And I was like, nobody's paying attention. I feel like nobody gets it. And all of a sudden now there was a conversation in a presidential election where people are talking about it. And in fact, even before Bobby Kennedy joined President Trump's campaign, Trump had a video out, which I was shocked at, which was the first time I'd ever heard a presidential candidate talking about the chronic disease epidemic, its effect on our children, what we should be doing about it. I was kind of shocked. So I think that for me, this is the most exciting moment. And then to see actual change happen, like our dietary guidelines changed, then that I never thought would happen. We've got rid of food dyes, which is a small thing, but not irrelevant. We're working on, making ultra processed food better defined and potentially limiting some of those things as safe to eat according to the FDA. We're mandating the medical schools soon have nutrition education. We're having SNAP waivers in dozens of states where states can actually say, hey, we're going to not let people use food stamps to buy soda. That never happened. I mean, even a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I was working with a congressman, a doctor, who was trying to get a law passed to just enable a pilot program, not to change the law, but it's like a pilot program in a couple of states to see what would happen if we stopped giving soda with food stamps. It was shut down by Congress. Like they didn't want to vote for it. And so now it's like, wow, this is just crazy what's happening. So I think this is kind of exciting to me. And I think, I just never expected this would happen.
Me too. If you asked me even 2 years ago if this would have happened, and I was involved, we can talk about this later. I was involved in the Dietary Guidelines Scientific Review Group, and just to be able to have the opportunity to make a transformative change, we can talk about, the highly processed foods, the refined carbs, the added sugars, the policy landscape, this, like you're talking about, the movement on SNAP, the state movements, like dozens of states with SNAP in school meals. Even in my state of Arizona, we have a bill passed to really restrict these ultra processed foods. I never would have imagined that was going to happen in the near future.
No, I mean, I live in Texas, and I in February testified in front of the Texas Senate Health and Committee, and the lead of that committee, they came over to dinner. The whole senators came over to dinner at my house the night before we had the hearing, and they were just all so engaged with this. And they were like, we're going to get rid of the crap in food. We're going to make sure doctors have to learn nutrition. We're going to make sure the kids, don't have exercise taken away as a penalty. That, we're going to, not allow this crap in schools. I was like, what? And so the bill passed. It was signed by the governor. I mean, there were some backroom dealings with the food industry that kind of weakened it a little bit, which I was disappointed at. But, it's massive steps forward.
Yeah. So it's a different world we're living in today from 6 years ago when Food Fix originally came out. So in this book, you argue that chronic diseases have become so common, we sort of accept them as inevitable, right? Can you tell us why aren't they inevitable?
Because they didn't exist 150 years ago. Like if you go back and look at, Carrie Taubes wrote about this. I forget the title of the book, but it was about diabetes. It's like we go back in the records of the Mass General Hospital in the 1800s, and there was like no cases of type 2 diabetes. They had type 1 diabetes, and it just didn't exist. Or there was like one case of some guy who just ate sugar all the time or something. And now it's like 1 in 2 Americans has prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Probably, actually, if you look at I would say the definitions are not well made because they're too restrictive. I think if you look at insulin resistance, we see 93% have some degree of metabolic health problems, according to Tufts research, looking at weight, blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, which all, by the way, are related to sugar, and then whether you had a heart attack or stroke, and only 6.8% of Americans don't have one of those problems. That's kind of crazy. So we see such an epidemic of this, and at Function Health, we're testing insulin. No, I asked Quest, which is our lab partner, how many tests do you get from doctors include insulin? He's like, well, less than 1%. I'm like, well, this is the most important test you need to know to see what's going on with your metabolic health. And I've been doing it for 30 years. And we look at our function data, which, the reference range is like 18 because it's so high because most Americans are insulin resistant. It should be 5 or less. But 65% of our members have high insulin. 65% at Function Health.
We're not even testing it. And it's like we're getting in way too late for just testing fasting glucose, right? It's just
absolutely, yeah.
It's baffling that's the norm.
Yeah, that's a late stage. The last thing to happen is your blood sugar goes up, right?
Yeah,
and that's the last thing that happens in the cascade of insulin resistance. Insulin goes up after a meal, then it goes up fasting, then sugar goes up, after a meal, and then it goes up fasting. So it's the fourth step in a 4-step process. And we just checked the last step and missed decades of dysfunction. So I'm really excited about what's happening. And we just got $100 million for functional medicine and lifestyle medicine research from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, which is insane.
Wow.
Wow. Think about that. Like I was just the laughing stock of medicine for decades. And if you look at my Wikipedia page, it's like, Dr. Hyman, a proponent of pseudoscience, functional medicine. Now Medicare has on its website, they were recruiting for research projects for 30 projects over 3 years, about $100 million. That's, to me, mind-blowing, right?
That has to be really validating, right? Because you've been at this for decades, and to have that high of a sort of level of confidence and investment, I think it really shows that this is the way forward, right?
Yeah. So
So
I'm pretty
we,
thrilled.
yeah. So we have 9 in 10 by some studies, 9 in 10 of us in the US have some sort of metabolic health. So pretty much it's a rarity to be in sort of optimal metabolic health.
Yeah,
Now,
you and I
can
are
we look at
abnormal.
yeah, can we look at why? Like, how is our food system designed? Is it sort of power and profits that are being prioritized over public health, or what's going on there?
Yeah, we definitely, privatize profits and socialize the costs in terms of food and healthcare and everything else. I mean, the Rockefeller Foundation found there was for every dollar we spent on food, there's $3 in collateral damage to our health, the economy, the environment. I mean, everything.
Hmm.
I think, to answer your question, we have, a chronic disease epidemic because of how we're living in the food system and the policies we have. So as a doctor, I was sitting in my office treating all these people with chronic disease, and I'm like, what's going on here? It's just like a flood of people. What's causing them to be sick? Well, it's mostly food. Okay. Well, then what's causing the food that we have? Well, it's our food policies. What's causing the food policies? So my always thinking about root cause, what's causing the
Mm-hmm.
food policies? Well, it's the food industry is causing this, and they're shaping the policies by being the biggest lobby group and providing the most misinformation and propaganda. It's really stunning to see their talking points. We're providing people convenience, we're providing them cheap food, we're providing them safe food. You're taking this all away from them. It's going to be dangerous, and people. I mean, it's just like it's kind of crazy, and the whole messaging has been nuts. And so I think we bought into the propaganda that it's your fault if you're sick, that the food industry has created a toxic food environment, but it's our choices, it's our personal responsibility. But it's not. It's like if everywhere we were just getting shot up with heroin, and you go, well, like I'm addicted. Well, yeah, you're addicted because you're getting heroin shot into you every day.
Right.
So it's somebody's giving you that for free, and I
Right.
think that's kind of the problem right now in America is that we have such a toxic food system. It's so hard to eat healthy. But actually, what I'm doing excited with my wife, we're doing a SNAP challenge where we're showing how you can actually cook, even though it's not very much money. It's about $7 a day per person. You can actually cook healthy, delicious meals that are relatively easy to make, quick to make, and that are affordable. And so we're going to do a whole SNAP demonstration where we're shopping and cooking and showing how you can do it. I mean, you're not having a $70 grass-fed ribeye steak from some ranch in Wyoming or something, but
Yeah.
you're eating real food, and that's the place to start.
That's amazing. I think you're really tapping into what a lot of people are sort of concerned about is sort of this, how do we really move the needle? How do we get access, and how can we afford these foods? And of course, when we look at the new food pyramid, you see the ribeye up there. There's been a lot of comments about the price of that type of food, right? And so it's really helpful to me. It'll be helpful to see how that is practically carried out, because I think that's one of the sort of lies is that it has to be expensive to eat healthy, right? And I think there are ways to do it. It doesn't have to be super expensive.
No.
It takes work.
I mean, I tell
Yeah.
a story in the book of this family that I saw as part of this movie Fed Up that I was in, where we had a small town in Easley, South Carolina, where there was a family of 5 living in a trailer on food stamps and disability, where they basically had almost no money, like $1,000 for food for a family of 5 for a month. And they basically were struggling. The father had dialysis already from kidney failure at 42 from type 2 diabetes, which is 100% preventable. And the mother was 100 plus pounds overweight. The son was 16 and almost diabetic and 50% body fat. It should be 10 to 20. I had them all DEXA scanned. And they didn't know how to cook. I went into the kitchen and they had everything was processed, like everything frozen in the fridge, and cans was just full of sugar and processed and weird ingredients. You couldn't tell a corn dog from a Pop-Tart if you just looked at the ingredient list. If you can't tell what it is by looking at the ingredient list on the back of the package, you probably shouldn't eat it. And I have this slide I give when I do talks where I show a ingredient list of a food. And then I say, can anybody guess what this is? I'll give you $100. Nobody can guess what it is. It's a Twinkie. It has like 47 ingredients or something, And so I said to this family, let me forget about lecturing you or anything. They really wanted to get healthy. I said, well, let's cook a meal together. So I'm on the board of the environmental working group. I gave them a guide called Good Food in a Tight Budget, which you can get online. And it shows you what are the cheapest vegetable, what are the cheapest meats, what are the cheapest, beans, grains, nuts, seeds, just real whole food.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the recipes you can use to make it? And we cooked a meal together, and they didn't have a cutting board. They didn't have a knife. Had butter knife. We were cutting like butter knives to cut sweet potatoes in chunks. It was really hard. And we roasted sweet potatoes. We made turkey chili. We made salad with like real lettuce, not white iceberg lettuce. We didn't have like bottled dressing. We just had olive oil and vinegar, salt and pepper. And they like loved it. And they were like, I said, look, I don't know if this is going to work, but here's my cookbook on how to cook food. And here's a guide on how to eat for less. They lived in one of the worst food deserts in America. On my way back home after the filming, I sent them cutting boards and knives. I ordered them on Amazon. I sent them to their trailer. And I said, okay, see how you do. So the mother texted me back a week later, said, we lost 18 pounds as a family this week. And I'm like, oh, wow, amazing. At the end of a year, the father lost 45 pounds, got a new kidney because he couldn't get a new kidney because he was too overweight. The mother lost 100 pounds. The son lost 50 pounds. He ended up gaining it back because he needed a job. And he went to go work at Bojangles, which is the only places they have down there are these fast food places. And then he struggled. But then eventually he texted me and we talked and I coached him on how to, get healthy. And he lost 132 pounds. And he was the first kid in his family to go to college. And a few years later, he wrote me an email, says, Dr. Hyman, would you write me a letter of recommendation for medical school? I'm like, yeah.
My goodness.
And now he's a doctor. I mean, so that's profound. And he in the movie, he's called Fed Up. You see him saying, when he went to get this job, he says, it's like putting an alcoholic to work in a bar, is what it's like. And so that's kind of America. It's like America's like one big bar for people who are addicts to food. I mean, 14% of the population of the world is addicted to food, according to the Yale Food Addiction Scale, including 14% of kids. All right. So that's about the same number of people who are alcoholic. So it's a problem.
Yeah, it's a massive problem. And it's this food environment. We can't get away from it. And so that's why I'm so happy to see these sort of bigger policy changes that are happening. But can we talk a little bit more about the biology now? When we talk about ultra-processed foods, you look at them a bit differently. They're not just nutrient poor, right? They also rewire our metabolism, our appetite. What is going on there? What happens when we eat these ultra-processed diets that are just primarily these refined, extracted ingredients?
A couple of things. One is what they are essentially is the foods that are not really food. And food is got a very specific definition. If you look at the Webster's Dictionary, it's basically a substance that is nutritious, that is eaten or drunk or otherwise taken in the body to sustain life. It basically that people or animals eat or drink to maintain life and growth and provide energy. By definition, ultra-processed food is not food. It causes the opposite. It doesn't maintain life and growth. It causes death and disease, right? So, and so we have to really be honest about what we're eating. And what it does is when you take, these raw materials of industrial commodity crops, soy, corn, wheat primarily, you take them to a laboratory and you deconstruct them. You pulverize them, you break them apart, you separate all the molecules, and then you reassemble them into things that look like food. So if you take like Pringles, for example, it looks like a potato chip, but it ain't a potato chip. You can literally go like this, and we're just turned to powder. And it's kind of gross. And so these things are technically not food, and they bypass our normal satiety mechanisms, our normal mechanisms for feeling full. They destroy our microbiome. They cause like high spikes often in insulin, which then creates this addictive cycle. It lights up the area in the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is the addiction center. That's the same area that lights up with heroin and cocaine. And so you've got stuff that's driving overriding your normal biology's mechanism for eating. Now, you could eat a whole bag of Chips Ahoy cookies, but if I give you a bag of avocados, there's no way you're going to eat that. If I gave you 5 steaks, you're never going to eat that. You could eat a sheet cake, and people do, but they're not eating 5 steaks, right? Maybe somewhere in Texas they are. I don't know. There's a restaurant here. If you have like 48-ounce steak, you get to eat it for free.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I think, we think it's food, but it's actually a chemical cocktail that is designed to addict us and to override our normal mechanism for feeling full. And the consequences on our biology is that it drives high levels of insulin, high levels of inflammation, destroys our microbiome. And that just sets forth a cascade because almost all chronic disease is related to those things, the inflammation, insulin resistance, and changes in our microbiome. And all the stuff that we're eating screws that up.
Yeah, and it seems very radical to say that those products are not foods, but I really like the way that you're defining it, that food is something that nourishes us, right?
Yeah.
And so let's not pretend like these products are really nourishing us, right? I mean, occasional treats are one thing, but the dominant lifestyle where we have 60% of calories, it's not working for us.
It ain't food. It just ain't
Yeah.
food. It's the thing. Wendell Berry has a favorite quote. He says, we have a food system that pays no attention to health, and we have a health system that pays no attention to food.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
Right, we got to link those together. I hope that starts to happen now. But, I look at data very often. I kind of look at these patterns and I just kind of get lost in the data. Do you still work with patients?
I do.
At an individual level? So can you tell me about it? What is your experience when you work with people who come in? Do you have sort of a standard approach when somebody comes in? And I'm assuming that many of your patients come to you with some sort of chronic condition, or they're trying to lose weight, or they have obesity, diabetes, heart disease. What do you do? How do you sort of walk them through that process?
Well, I think, most people don't really understand their biology. They don't know how human biology works. And most doctors don't actually. And try to help them understand like what the root causes are, explain what's happening in their body, and help them understand what they need to do to correct it. And so it's really it's a systems approach. It's called network medicine, systems medicine, functional medicine. I don't really care what you call it. It's the future of medicine. And that's what we're all going to be practicing soon enough. And it's really looking at how the body works as an integrated ecosystem, not a bunch of different organs and parts and things. So, like, for example, if you have eczema or skin issues, it's usually a leaky gut issue. Or if you have an autoimmune issue, it could be a microbiome problem. It could be heavy metals or toxins. It could be tick infection or mold infection or a bunch of different things. So people don't actually know how to think about these problems. And so it's a thinking problem. And so with functional medicine, we basically think differently. We go, okay, well, what is the root cause? What's your history? What was your mother eating when you were pregnant? Were you breastfed? Were you born by C-section? Did you take antibiotics when you were young? What was your childhood like? What did you have childhood experiences? What exposure did you have? Do you live in a moldy house? Do you eat a lot of tuna fish? I mean, just go through all these questions.
So
what is your diet like?
More time than 30 seconds with them?
I mean, actually, in order for me to really understand it, it's hard. Like, I think technology and AI will help. And that's where I think Function Health is going to come in and make it really simple. But for right now, I have to have my physician's patient fill out like a 30-page questionnaire. Then my physician's assistant goes through all that with them, all their records, organizes it all for me, puts it in a chart. So I can it's probably a couple of hours of work to prepare all the data. And then I spend another hour or more with them, actually reviewing it all, making sure that, we fill in any gaps and then decide on what the plan is. And, it just takes that much time to think through these things. Now, with AI, you can do it in like 3 seconds. So, and it's amazing. So I think we're entering a new era where it's not going to be so manual, but right now we have to spend a lot of time to really figure it out.
Yeah, I think people deserve the time. They deserve the attention. How do you feel about this new idea of teaching? I mean, it's not a new idea, but I think it's a potential new policy where doctors in the U.S. will be required to get some sort of level of nutrition training. Did you see that announcement?
Yeah, I've been driving that. Yeah, that was one of the key things that I was know Robert F. Kennedy quite well, and have been friends with him for 20 years. And I put this bug in his ear when he was running.
Mm-hmm.
He was running as a Democrat, he was running as an independent and Republicans. But I basically said, look, healthcare is not going to change unless doctors understand what's going on. Food is the biggest cause of disease. It's also the biggest cure, and doctors know nothing about food, right? So, most doctors understand that, like I even gastroenterologists, like I'm like, well, do you think that food might be playing a role in what's going on with gut health? Like if you have inflammatory bowel disease or you have reflux or you have irritable bowel, like, oh no, I'm like, well, you're putting pounds of this foreign stuff in this tube. You're the expert on, and you think food has nothing to do with it. Or one of them was like, wow, that's interesting. I never thought of that. Like, great idea. And it just kind of blows my mind. But I think, there are a lot of key levers that I talk about in Food Fix, and changing medical education is one of them. And so I recently talked to Robert Kennedy. He told me how he brought all the heads of the accreditation bodies into his office and said, look, either you're going to change the curriculum and the tests and questions, because you basically only study to the test. My daughter just graduated medical school, and the only thing she's going to study is what's on the test. Even though she knows food is important because she's my daughter,
Right.
she's like, "Oh, I can't, Dad, because I got to study this stuff, and that's not on the test."
Yeah.
And so, there'll be hopefully 5 to 15% of the questions on food, and not like some nutritional deficiency you got from like, living in Africa in some village where you're not getting enough iodine or not getting enough like vitamin A, but like, actual modern, chronic disease related to our processed food diet, and how do we use food to cure as food as medicine. So, uh, he said, either you guys figure this out, or I got an 800-pound gorilla with a baseball bat in the closet, and I'll let him out. Meaning he was joking, but he's like, basically, you got to fix this, or I'm going to make you. And so that's kind of exciting, and I think that's coming, and so all these things are coming: food labeling, food marketing, food nutrition research, functional medicine research. Like I said, we just got $100 million for that. The dietary guidelines aren't perfect, but they're historic. I mean, never before in any dietary guidelines have ever been said that we shouldn't be eating highly processed food. Like, just didn't never happen, you know? So that's pretty exciting. They even said in there that certain people with chronic disease will benefit from a low carb diet. Never said anywhere, like nothing, zero. Like, and that, our diet it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things going on that give me a lot of hope. Can we talk about these guidelines then? You mentioned a couple things I think that are really important. Obviously, the first time, which seems like common sense, but the first time that highly processed foods were actually called out specifically. We also talk about, for the first time, there's strong language on refined carbs, right? That for refined grains, up till recently, you could have half the grains be refined, right? Added sugar has stronger limits. What overall, like, what do you think? How do you grade these guidelines? You can talk about any critiques you want, the positives, any negatives. How do you feel about these guidelines?
Yes, I think they are a historic step forward, both in terms of the courageous nature of going up against the food industry, and also, incorporating this sort of a broader swath of the science and common sense, you know, and acknowledging things that we just never acknowledged before. So, on the positive side, yes, highly processed foods, upping the protein requirements, getting rid of the low-fat dairy recommendations, eating more fruits and vegetables, eating whole grains, customizing and personalizing based on different needs and ages and things is important. Talking about low carb diets important. I mean, where I would say I still was a little frustrated was it didn't say dairy is optional. It kind of implied it was mandatory. It says choose dairy, as opposed to, this can be a part of a healthy diet, but it's not like you should have 3 servings a day as a kind of a recommendation. 0 to 3 is fine, like that, as opposed to 3. So I think that was my big beef. I think, there was a few nuances around saturated fat that I think could have been done a little bit better. So for example, it's important for you to understand that there's genetic variation in how people respond. So you got to pay attention to your biology. That's why functional health is so great, because you can test your cholesterol, you can change your diet. Say, I'm going to eat coconut oil and butter for 2 months, and then I'm going to check my cholesterol, or 6 weeks, or I'm going to cut out that and eat this and you can see what's going on. So you got to use your body as your own control. Second is, they really should have said, if you're eating a diet higher in saturated fat, you want to make sure you're not eating it with starch and sugar, because that makes it deadly. So butter on broccoli, good. Butter on bread, bad. Okay. So
yeah,
although I love butter on bread, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, it's the combo of saturated fat and flour or sugar that's the problem. And when your diet's rich in that, which most of our diets are, then saturated fat can be more problematic, and it causes more, lipid particle issues and small particles and so forth.
I think there's also, on the saturated fat issue, there's this, food matrix effect where we see for dairy, for example, when it's a part of the minimally processed whole dairy, there's usually better impacts on lipids than when you have sort of just the butter itself. It could be the milk fat globule membrane, could be some of the food matrix effects. So I think there was, when you kind of read some of the details, it does say and emphasize whole food sources. But, I personally did one of those tests like you were talking about, 2 months of eating the higher saturated fat. And then I went 2 months eating lower saturated fat, a lot more sort of whole grains and legumes. ApoB stayed exactly the same. But you know what happened to my triglycerides?
No.
Triglycerides went up about 50% when I went to the higher carb, the more whole grains and legumes.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, they do.
For me, it was just like, okay, so it's nothing necessarily to say that whole grains and legumes are bad. Of course, they're not, but in moderation, right? Like, I think for me personally, having whole food sources like eggs, dairy, a little bit of meat, seafood with some saturated fat actually was a better for my lipids than not doing that. So
exactly. So that's what I mean. You have to, what did I think Roger Williams said? Statistical humans are of little interest to me. I'm interested in real people. And he's the father of biochemical individuality.
Yeah. Insightful. Okay. So there's a whole other aspect that goes beyond the guidelines, and we touched on this quite a bit already. We're talking about what do we do about trying to get people to go from where they are, which is very highly processed diets, refined foods, metabolic disease, chronic disease is rampant. How do we make a change? So we've talked about some of the things around school meals, some of the SNAP levers. Can you talk about just holistically what you like to see over the next few years to really make policy implementations that really change the landscape and change people's health?
Yeah, I mean, it's not one thing, right? So this is such a multifactorial thing. So I kind of break it down in different areas in my mind. One, let's call it like research. We need a lot more research from the NIH focused on chronic disease and nutrition and food as medicine. So we should have an Institute for Nutrition. There isn't one. National Institute for Nutrition. India has one. We don't have one. And it should be significantly funded, billions of dollars of money that should flow into this. Really important. It's second is we should be performing medical education, which will change the generation of doctors, which will help change medicine. 3, we should be changing our agricultural policies to support the production of fruits and vegetables and healthier foods and more regeneratively raised food, which I think is both scalable and economically smart for farmers and the country. It's going to mean the big meat producers are a problem, big corn, soy producers are going to be messed up, but that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. I think we need to change the food labeling so that the front of package makes it really easy to understand what you're eating. In South America, they've done this where they put stop signs if it has too much of this or that or the other thing that's bad. And it's not perfect, but it changes behavior. 3, we should change food marketing, especially at least for kids. And there's kids see, literally, I don't know, so many ads. I think, I don't know what the number is, but I think the food spends like $13 billion a year on food marketing to kids.
and that doesn't happen in other countries, right? That's the crazy thing.
And there are restrictions. We have the First Amendment here, but like there are restrictions. I think Syria and the US are the only ones that allow that. Or at least Syria did under the tyrannical regime of Assad.
And even on the box marketing, my daughter, she was like, "Dad, the marketing works on me. It's so effective." Like, I just look at the Lucky Charms box and it's true. It's like not just the marketing on TV, it's the packaging. And you said labeling. You can also do things. Some of these countries in South America have actually changed the marketing on the package, which can actually make a big difference too. If the kids,
for example, they took off all the cartoon characters. They took off all the cartoon characters. So no more Tony the Tiger. There's no more like Toucan Sam. It's like all gone. It's just a box that says Frosted Flakes on it and with big black warning signs on it. And that changes behavior. So changing marketing, changing labeling. I think changing the ruling on what's safe to eat. So we did this with trans fats in 2015, where after decades of research, just for people that don't really know this whole thing, basically grass meat is generally recognized as safe. So, when the food laws were made in the 50s, like Crisco was a thing, and they're like, oh, this has been used for the last, at that time was developed in 1911. So it was like, let's last 40, 50 years. It's got to be safe. We're using it. It's shortening, but they just grandfathered it in as safe to eat, right? Or food dyes or emulsifiers or any of this crap that's in our food without actually having research on it. And so we did the same thing with ultra processed food. We never had research on it or highly processed food. And so in 2015, the FDA ruled that trans fats were no longer safe to eat. That means that all the food companies had a runway to take the trans fats out of food.
It only took, a few decades?
It took I think it took 100 years.
100 years from the science when we found out the problem.
It wasn't 100 years. It was 100. There was a guy who actually sued the FDA in the 90s. Was a doctor who was working on this issue for years. Finally got them to do it. I wrote about it in my book. I think Eat Fat Get Thin. I maybe even in Food Fix. And then so basically the sugar and starch that's industrially produced, that's these pulverized, chemically altered, deconstructed foods that are reassembled into things that look like food but aren't food, they are no longer safe to eat based on the current evidence we have. And we can say, oh, we need more evidence, we need more research. You can say that forever. And that's what the food industry does. But we have plenty of evidence. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is a problem. And in general scientific consensus, I think there's no doubt this is a problem. So based on the current evidence, the FDA can rule based on existing laws that the starches and sugars in ultra-processed or highly processed foods are not safe to eat anymore, which means that they will have to be taken out of the food system by a certain date. That's a good thing. The other thing that is going to have to happen is the procurement could change. So in other words, the government buys food, and this will change based on the dietary guidelines, which is really why it's so important. So, when the government has school lunches, when they do prison foods, hospital foods, when they do, DOD, Department of Defense, when they have any federal programs, WIC, all these have to follow dietary guidelines, and they can choose. The government can choose. We're going to buy food from, that's only whole real food for taxpayer dollars. We're not going to use taxpayer dollars to buy food for people that we know is going to kill them.
Right.
So the other thing is there should be, true transparency around conflicts of interest in research. And I think this is really a problem that we have where something's published, we think it's fine. And I remember reading in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which is one of the top medical journals in the world. Sugar consumption is not linked to chronic disease, as the title of the article. I'm like, something like that. I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense to me. And I started reading the paper and going through it, and I was like, oh, well, who funded this study? And it was like, the Sugar Association, and it was the International Life Science Institute, which sounds like great. That's one of the front groups. International Life Sciences Institute. That sounds pretty good, but it's all the big food companies. Or, and the guy who was the chair of the head of the study was on the board of Tate & Lyle, which is one of the biggest makers of high fructose corn syrup. How could that be published in a reputable medical journal? So, and then a lot of the journals are corrupt. And the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition is funded by the food industry. It's like a lot of the expose is there. Mary Nessa wrote a book about it, had her on my podcast about it, but it was basically about the corruption in the nutrition and food industry and research and how corrupt it is. So all these levers have to get pulled, and it's not like one thing, but it has to work across all the different domains. So from field to fork, we have to change it, and I think we also need to reimburse the right kind of healthcare. That's why I'm so excited about this Medicare funding of $100 million, because they're trying to see what's going to stick. Like, okay, well, if you use functional medicine for treating diabetes or for autoimmune disease or for whatever neurodegenerative disease, are we getting better results? Are we getting better health outcomes? And I think the answer is going to be yes after doing this for 30 years. But when that evidence emerges, then that'll get paid for. So imagine if doctors got paid to do the right thing instead of what they're doing now, which is not necessarily the right thing, but it's what they get paid to do.
Change the incentives. Yeah.
Yeah, change the incentives. Exactly. So that's really exciting to me. So there's things that are going to happen out across this whole industry that are just, and people don't really realize what's happening because they hear, Venezuela, or they hear ICE, or they hear crazy stuff is happening, and they don't know what to think about it. And then they hear Bobby Kennedy vaccines, and it's all the media but even the New York Times, which hates Bobby Kennedy, was like, yeah, the dietary guidelines is so bad. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. It was like a very snarky kind of title, but it was like, oh, actually, he's not a total quack, and so I was like, okay, so I think we get distracted by all the noise, but we have to look at actually the progress happening behind the scenes. And there's a lot of good people doing good things in the agencies that I know, at the NIH, at the FDA, at the HHS, and even at the USDA. It's all starting to shift, and I'm like blown away. I mean, you have to understand how big a deal this is. Under Bloomberg, when he was mayor, he wanted to do a pilot around SNAP, saying, well, could we take the right to buy soda away from people on food stamps and see what would happen? Let's do a study. And he has to get approval from the USDA, which does the food stamp program, or the agriculture department. And it was like, they wouldn't give him permission to do a tiny little study. They just wouldn't give him permission because the risk was too high that it would show that it was bad. And now Brooke Rollins, who worked a lot with agri industry, so I didn't know what she was going to do. She's allowed these, we call them SNAP waivers, which means that states can apply for the right to do this. And they're happening like crazy. So I'm like, wow. Like, again, I feel like I just went through a portal, like a time travel to 100 years from now, but it happened like in 5 years. And like literally when I wrote that book, Food Fix, I was like, here's the problem. Here's what's wrong. Here's what needs to be done to fix it. But in my mind, I'm like, this is a long slog. And I spent, the last 6 years with my nonprofit, running around Congress, talking to and HHS and USDA and the FDA, talking to everybody, and just talking about these issues, educating them, having hearings, and trying to get policies done. And we got little things done, but this is just like a tsunami. Like, I was making little baby steps and making change, but it was like a lot.
Yeah, I think this is transformative. I agree with you 100%. I did not expect to see this much change. And I think there's actually a lot that the left and the right can agree about, right? Like even the fact that Congress, the Senate, they're talking about ultra-processed foods has never happened before. And most of this is like very common sense, like restricting soda from SNAP is going to be a positive benefit to everybody, right? It's the right thing to do.
I mean, why should the U.S. government be the source of Coca-Cola's single biggest profit center?
At people's expense, right? People's health. Yeah.
Because I think 20% of Coke's U.S. profits come from food stamps. Walmart, I think a huge amount of food stamps they get. But I mean, you can buy good food there. And I think, people, there's a lot of plus and minus. People don't like Walmart, but it's the biggest organic grocer. People can buy cheap food. I mean, I think, you can go to Erewhon and buy, get a tiny little grocery bag for $500. You can go get a giant grocery cart at Walmart for $500. So, I mean, I think people who can use that service is fine. But yeah, I think we're in this kind of crazy new era, and I'm like, what's going on?
It's exciting. And, I have kids in public schools, and they've been in California and Santa Monica, which you think out of all places in the U.S. would have healthy foods and school meals. I've had them in daycares in the DC area and now public schools in Arizona. And the schools, they're feeding them, my daughter's favorite breakfast is donut holes, which is donut holes, and then cinnamon rolls and Lucky Charms. And it's just like, come on, this is pretty common sense stuff that we should all be able to get behind, right? Even changing sort of the milk from the chocolate milk to whole milk, regular milk in the school. That's a big step forward,
Yeah. So I agree. They're like unsweetened milk, which is great. Like that's in the dietary guidelines,
So in your book, Food Fix Uncensored, you also talk about the way forward with individuals and maybe a movement. What is going on? Can you tell us, like, how can people become part of the fix if they really care about this?
They can go to foodfix.org and they can learn more about how to become engaged. And there's things that individuals can do. There's things that you can do in your community. There's things that you can do to advocate with your congressmen and senators, your local state representatives, governors. And it matters, like I think that you'd be surprised how much they listen to their constituents if they make noise, and it changes things and it changed their behavior. I mean, that's why RFK got nominated because, confirmed as in a job as HHS secretary because Cassidy got like 200,000 calls to his office.
You can't deny that, right?
No, and he's like, okay,
can't ignore it.
So I think that, that really is important. There's things that businesses can do. There's things the government needs to do. There's things that philanthropists can do. And all that is laid out in the book. And I really encourage people to kind of go check that out. Let's go to foodfixuncensored.org and you can learn all about what you can do and get a lot of access to free bonuses and guides on how you can make a difference. And
wow. Okay. So go to foodfixuncensored.org. Also get Mark's new book. I think this is number 20, 21. What are we at now?
It's 20.
No wonder you don't sleep well. Okay.
I know.
So Food Fix Uncensored, it should be out today, the day that this episode is released. And thank you so much, Dr. Mark Hyman, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for the great conversation. I really appreciate it.